Laughter is the key to the universe. It is. It's just the key. When you come into the deepest holy of holies, the secret of secrets, the Holy Grail itself, if you're able to ever reach that place, you will find echoing there eternal laughter. You know, I had this with a friend of mine. I was being regressed, and I went to a deep regression, and in that regression, at some point, I heard her voice say, you know, because I was back at my conception, but not just the conception of this body, but the conception of my soul, and that was quite something. And I saw that conception take place, and then the kind of growth of the soul as it was born, and then came down into the space-time continuum of this universe. And the voice asked me, her voice said, do you have a mission? What is your mission on this plane? And that question just went right to the core of me, into the core of that fetus, that conceived soul fetus. And the response that came back was just raucous laughter. It was just laughter. And I totally got the joke. I just laughed and laughed and laughed. I could feel this like delight of like, do I have a mission? And the answer was laughter. You know, it was like, that was a question that can't be answered with a logical, in a logical way, because that's, you know, the core imprinting of creation, the delight. Creation delights in exploration. And of course, part of that exploration leads into terrible suffering. And still, deep down at the base, it's delighting, even in that suffering, because it's exploring and growing and learning, and then letting go, and then healing, and then forgiving. And so it's a really tough paradox, that one, for us humans, to find, you know, that kind of, and you know, because there are things that are totally unlaughable, right? Absolutely. You know, there are terrible things. You can't possibly laugh at them. And yet, in the core of all things, there is this delight at exploring consciousness and learning and growing. And, you know, when we really understand that, it changes our attitude towards suffering and towards the suffering in others. It actually increases our empathy and our compassion in some way, and it makes us more useful because we're not so caught up in the game. We don't get so caught up in, I must fix this, I must fix this, I've got to help, you know, which is a very noble impulse, but it's also like, if you have a little bit of, I don't know, what should we call it? If you have a bit of cosmic detachment, you are of much more service, you know, to people in suffering than if you are really invested in them getting better. You know, that detachment is what enables you to kind of really be present for them, without your emotions being so involved. And of course, emotions do get involved, and we can't help that because we're human. And yet, there is something about digging deep into the core of creation and experiencing it from that place. You know, the other thing I had once, I was sitting on a beach, I had this amazing tea, and this tea was teaching me things. You know, it was teaching me layers as I drank more of this tea. It was like a very special ancient tea, and I was drinking it and steeping it and then re-steeping it. And they say that when you get to the 7th steeping of the tea, it releases its deepest secret. And I think I was on the 7th steeping of this tea, drinking it in little cups. And I was looking at this cup, and I was sitting on a beach, just on my own in deep contemplation. I love tea as a means to contemplate. And I was looking at this tea, and the wind just blew gently across the surface of the tea in the teacup. And this voice just said, "It's all just a storm in a teacup." As soon as I heard that inside my head and my heart, I started to laugh. I started to laugh and laugh and laugh. I was on my own just laughing. I thought, oh my God, the whole of the world is in that teacup. The whole of my life is in that teacup. And that wonderful expression, "it's just a storm in a teacup." I can't explain the level of that joke and how it impacted me. Some passing avatar just whispered it in my ear and then was gone. And it does not make light of anything in the world. It does, it just gives you the perspective of wisdom. That there's always more that you can't see, and there's always a reason for things. And that, if you're looking at something that's in the middle of a trial in some way, it will in time lead to a healing. It will get reunited and put back together in some way. And that may not be in this lifetime, but it will come back together in another reality. And so because we don't see the wider dimensional field often, we miss that. We miss that reuniting of the fragments. So try and, explore these things and be open to laughter. And if there are people that make you laugh, see them, spend time with them, belly laugh. Belly laugh. The comedians are the most precious people in the world. They're often like, there's this strange paradox of the comedian, like Robin Williams, for example, one of the funniest men ever to have lived, and the most open-hearted, beautiful man who made so many people cry for joy and laughter. He himself deeply tormented, deep sadness. So laughter often contains its opposite. It's very serious. And, there's something about that needs to also be contemplated. That laughter and deep sadness go together. And that laughter can be a wonderful relief and release. Also animals can be incredibly funny. Watch animals, they can really make you laugh. They do the funniest things, the most unexpected things, the cutest things. I used to have this cat, black cat, who's called Monkey. And I was living in Oregon, and we had it was hot there in the summer, so you have the windows with this mesh, this netting, mosquito netting, and it's just netting, so it's and they kind of hang. They're like in these frames, so you don't have to have you can have the windows open all the time, all night, and the buzzers don't get in and out. Anyway, we were sitting there having supper, and we had these nets all on the windows, so the night breeze was blowing in. And suddenly, we could hear Monkey out there, and he's like a really funny, crazy cat. And suddenly he lands flying through the air on this screen with all four paws connected, like shkum, right? Like, I don't even know where it came from. It was like the funniest thing. Like there he is, splat on this screen, and his weight very slowly starts to go like back because the screen starts to detach and come back. And then he's like, oh, and he's got his claws stuck in there. So he's just like, the whole screen falls out and the window falls out with this cat who's then just gone in a moment of like, it's just one of those absolutely uproariously funny moments. Just funny, the things that they do. And cats are usually so careful and kind of graceful, and yet sometimes they can be incredibly clumsy, and those are very funny things. So enjoy laughing at the world and laughing at the animals, and let the laughers come to you and dig into the child inside, and belly laugh and tension release laugh, and really tickle each other a little bit, be a bit playful.